John, great to have you here. Wanted to talk to you, of course, about your upcoming lawsuit against Health Canada's changes to our country's medical marijuana laws.
Yep.
So, for those who don't know, John, I'm wondering if you could just give us a general overview of what the case is all about, and then we'll get into a few specifics afterwards.
There's a constitutional challenge. We're saying that the marijuana for medical purposes regulations, which are the new regulations that came in June and run parallel to the marijuana medical access regulations, the MMAR, that have existed going back now almost 14 years. The MMPR will have the effect of repealing the MMAR effective March 31st and takes away the right to personally produce or have a caregiver produce for you. And we're saying that that defect in the MMPR results in placing some of the patients in the same position as Terry Parker years ago, forcing them to choose between their liberty and their health because they can't afford the licensed producer prices. We're not opposed to licensed producers. It's a good thing for those who can afford it, and eventually that may lead to having an established situation when we finally get around to legalizing. But basically, the taking away of the personal production and caregiver type of designated grower, we say, results in violating the Section 7 charter rights of the patients because they're medically approved and their liberty is an issue if they are at risk of being charged, like Mr. Parker. And it must be remembered that Mr. Parker grew his own plants for himself in his premises out of economic hardship. He couldn't afford black market prices, and so we say there's no difference. There's all these people who can't afford the government or the black market prices. That's why many of them learned to grow their own in their basements, putting them outside whenever they can to save on electricity costs, and controlling the strains and so on that are effective for them. So we say, we don't mind seeing the MMAR disappear except for the personal production designated caregiver type of grower and related provisions, and we're not unhappy to see the MMPR except for the fact that it takes away the personal production. And so that's the issue. It's a Section 7 charter, right to life, liberty, and the security of your person, and it's liberty and the security of the person that are engaged. If you can't get medicine that your doctors approved you that's effective, then the security of your person is impacted. And we say the government is going too far. They don't have to go this far. They could still preserve personal production and caregivers. And so that's a principle of fundamental justice called being overbroad, going further than necessary. Another principle of fundamental justice is that the impact of the legislation will result in grossly disproportionate effects. So the gross disproportionality, of course, is forcing the patients to have to go without or have to return back to other types of narcotics with significant side effects, these sorts of things. So the liberty issue arises if it's a charge, and of course they should all defend, get a lawyer, file a constitutional challenge, take the Terry Parker position. And I think people should waive their right to remain silent, tell the police their whole story, if be cooperative and show them you're a patient, show them you're medically approved, show them that you don't have any fires or risks or mold or toxic chemicals or all the nonsense that they're using as an excuse to try and change it. So that's essentially what our case is all about. We're also saying that the limit on dried marijuana that existed in the MMIR and that they have reintroduced in the MMPR, we're saying that's an unreasonable limit based on the Smith case that is a BC-only case, and that will be heard, or was heard in December by the Court of Appeal, and we're awaiting a decision there. So people in BC who've been using other than dried marijuana are going to be prejudiced again by having to stop doing anything that's not dried, because again they'll be back in the pre-Smith situation. We're also challenging a couple of other technical aspects of the MMPR, the 150-gram limit. Licensed producers are only going to be able to produce or ship 150 grams at a time. Patients are only going to be able to possess 150 grams at a time, and it'll have to be stuff that has the label on it from the licensed producer for you to be lawfully in possession under the new scheme. And so we're trying to correct that, and we're pointing out that that's an unreasonable limit. The MMAR was 30 times your daily dosage. And that would allow people to travel, or people who work in remote camps and things like that, or have difficulty getting their medicine if they have to get a shipment 4 times a week, that sort of thing. So that, I think I've covered everything in terms of the basic outline.
Yeah, thanks, John. Now, part of this whole attack on the medical marijuana system by the government, or the changes, are based on this idea that there's been fires and that there's dangers to home growing. Is there evidence of any of these fires and other dangers that they're talking about?
No, there's some evidence of some fires, but they haven't been able to produce any statistics that indicate anybody who was harmed by toxic mold, any specific fires as between illicit and illegal operations, or as between those that have been put together by certified electricians and those that haven't. So it's just the fire chiefs and the RCMP, who did a report for the Association of Chiefs of Police. They go on about these sorts of things. They're not experts on mold, and they're just saying, "Well, I saw some mold in a grow," but people who know what they're doing get the humidifiers and make sure that they vent properly and so on and so forth. People who have them done by certified electricians and do other things to worry about the heat and stuff like that, well, they too, have taken proper precautions. If you look at the fire studies, the biggest risk of fire is from kitchens. People leaving different kinds of pot on a stove, and the thing boiling over and stuff like that. The 2007 statistics don't even refer to grow-offs and stuff. Now, the police chief report, they talk about 194 cases they looked at that were really up 134, and they talk about a lot of excessive production and some violations. But again, they could not give us any statistics or peer-reviewed stuff that showed, anything other than this anecdotal evidence of, cases reviewed by the police that show some abuse, or, that weren't put together properly, and therefore there's some risk, these sorts of things. But, they maybe, being generous, I think their stories totaled something like 300, and we're now talking about patients totaling 38,000. So, they couldn't give us any detailed breakdown. They just parrot back the same old stuff. Len Garris, the fire chief from Surrey, who goes on and on. And yet electricians and mold experts tell me if you do it properly, there's no greater risk than anything else. They go on about CO2 burners and people leaving on their CO2 burner and how you can get hurt by doing that. Well, people shouldn't be messing around with these things if they don't know what they're doing or don't do them properly. But a CO2 burner is much like having a barbecue or a natural gas heating system in your house. And you've got to be aware of these sorts of things and make sure accidents don't happen. So, but, there simply isn't any evidence to show that there's a greater propensity or incidence of these sorts of things if you have a medical grow. Lots of neighbors are upset because a number of people don't bother to do things properly in terms of smell. They're not using proper charcoal filters or replacing their filters or whatever. And some of them seem to have adopted a fairly casual or not a very good attitude towards their neighbors. People have to understand that the smell of marijuana isn't pleasant for everybody. It offends some people. There are things you can do to get rid of the smell or to suppress the smell, and you're committing a nuisance and interfering with your neighbor's enjoyment of their property. You shouldn't do that. You should respect other people. So those are some of the things we're hearing about. Really, the government has decided as a matter of policy to try and treat cannabis like any other prescribed drug when it's not a prescribed drug. They're using it, they said in cross-examination, the oxycodone model or the morphine model. Well, you know, people who are prescribed those drugs are able to get coverage on the health plan and things like that. Here, the only group that's going to cover people are the Veterans Affairs. There aren't any existing medical and insurance plans and so on. And so it's trying to, you know, put a square peg in a round hole instead of realizing that this is not like oxycodone. You can't grow oxycodone. This is more like food, and they don't prevent people from growing their own food. You don't have to go through all the microbiological testing and all the rest of it if it's for yourself, as long as you're not selling it. And the same with natural health care products. People can produce those for themselves. It's only if you're selling things to the public that you obviously, especially if you're holding it out to be medicine, you have to meet some high standards and regulations. And that's why the licensed producers have to do so. And that's why, you know, the designated grower, who is not a limited caregiver type designated grower, is going to be subsumed by this new legislation as well. So we say the choice should be there for the individual to produce it for him or herself, and if they're unable to do so, their caregiver should be able to do it for them.
Right. Now, John, you talked about changes to access regarding the price of marijuana in the new system. Because they're getting rid of all of the home grows, marijuana patients are now being forced to go to this commercial grower program, the mail order system, where they're sent their medicine through the mail and it's only available through a few different licensed producers. Now, what are the major price differences there? How much more expensive is it going to be?
Well, the people who are growing it for themselves tell me they're able to do it between 50 cents and $4 a gram, depending upon their air conditioning and electrical costs, how much they can put outdoor for periods of time, that sort of thing. The lowest price offer that I've seen so far is Peace Naturals, and they come down as low as $3 for a special program. But most of them are at least 5 to about 12. Tweed is advertising on their webpage that they'll go down 25% for people, or 20% for people who are registered in disability pension programs and things of that nature. There's one other one. There's a number of them that are between $4 and $5. Some of them not available though until May, that sort of thing. So the general range is about $6 to $12, but there's some, as I say, come down to about $3. So, and some include shipping and some don't at those prices. So the prices are comparable to compassion clubs, dispensaries. In fact, some of the compassion home dispensaries may be a bit higher, but they also usually have programs that are for disabled or people on pensions. I'm told the black market price is still $10 to $15 a gram. I find that hard to believe because I've had other police tell me that the grow-ops are closing down left, right, and center because of the prices. Colorado, Washington State, Uruguay, 22 medical states in the U.S., all of these developments that are going on has basically eliminated the Canadian market. There is an oversupply, including some from licensed growers that have been selling out the back door. But all of this has been effective to, well, it's putting the guys who remediate grow-ops or mold and fire guys are going out of business because they don't have enough business, and the illicit growers are going out of business. It just shows you that that's more effective. The oversupply is more effective at turning organized crime away because they won't have an interest in buying a product they can't sell. So the whole public safety, public security angle that they keep going on about really is not as big as they say. It's heading in the other direction. So again, I tell people they should vote for the Liberal Party of Canada because Mr. Trudeau is the only one who's prepared to legalize. His father and the former Justice Minister, Chrétien, were the ones that brought us the Charter. Without the Charter, we'd be stuck with Harper's government doing whatever they want, with no constitutional standards. So, there's a chance if you're an NDPer, you're going to have to hold your nose and vote, not split the vote. And let's get this thing done. I've been involved in this for over 40 years, and I can't believe that we're still arguing about legalizing cannabis.
No kidding. About specific strains, you mentioned that that's part of this lawsuit as well. I guess with the new commercial producers, people who have been developing their own strains that are targeting certain illnesses that they have and work very well for them, they won't be able to actually have that kind of medicine anymore. So is that, you said that that's part of the case as well?
Well, we haven't actually challenged that specific provision because there is provision in the regs for somebody to sell their seed or their clones, strains, to a licensed producer. And the government is saying that most of the licensed producers have taken advantage of that option. But the problem, I've heard of some designated growers selling their plants to licensed producers so that they've been able to increase their supply. But while I think it's a good idea in principle so that people could try and maintain their strains and so on, but there are proprietary interests in some of these strains, and so they'd have to work something out, I guess, with the licensed producer. But the problematic thing I see is, how can these licensed producers, if there's only 8 of them, cater to the 37,000, 38,000 people and all their different strains? I mean, it's going to be very difficult to do that if you're growing on a bulk sort of basis as opposed to just on an individual basis. I would expect it would be extremely costly and difficult for them to sort of maintain individual strains for individual patients.
Yeah, exactly.
So that provision is there, and hopefully if we get the injunction exemption, we'll be able to carry on. But otherwise, I see it being a considerable problem, just like with the extracts and edible, people who are juicing, for example, who technically you're not supposed to juice because it's not dried marijuana. So, and the government only talks about the butane extraction stuff as dangerous. They don't talk about, making hash or salves or cream or all these sorts of things. So it's going to be a problem.
Right. Now, John, you mentioned to me that over the past few days you've been talking to police for the case.
Oh, law enforcement, yeah. We cross-examined Officer Holmquist the other day, who was put forward as their guy from the marijuana enforcement team, supposedly to tell us all about the mold and fires and public safety, but most of his evidence was to do with large-scale organized crime grow-up, including mostly either illicit grow-ups or large illegal medical grows that they assert are taken over by organized crime or people who've been taken advantage of by organized crime and this sort of thing. But he hadn't even counted them up to see the numbers, and he agreed that the total number of stories there was under 300, which, as I said before, is less than 1% of the total medical market anyway, and even less of the overall market.
Right. Now, John, if this case does go through and you do win, what does that actually mean for the system itself?
Well, the government's complaining about high administration costs and how it's just shooting up. The numbers are shooting up. They're predicting 50,000 by the end of this month and 400,000 by 2022, 10 years from now. And so they're saying, they can't keep up. Well, they haven't been doing inspections or been doing very few inspections and monitoring, which is part of the problem. Had they done their jobs in that respect, that might have saved a lot of the problems that are being talked about. And so the government's going to say, here's our policy, that's what we've decided, and we can't afford to do this, we have other priorities, and so on and so forth. And they'll try to make it as if it's the patients who are trying to force them to come up with a program, just like Oton and the autism stuff. But that isn't what's happening here. What's happening here is the government was told by the courts that in order to not violate the Constitution, they have to provide a viable exemption. So it's for them to provide this viable exemption, and what they've come up with is simply not viable in the same as the situation existed at the time of Parker. So a viable system would allow people to continue to produce for themselves. I mean, if they want to have the patient pay for a yearly inspection or something like that in order to show that there is no fire risk, there is no mold risk, and so on, most patients would probably be quite willing to pay for that in order to be able to continue and so on. So, it's hard to predict, but the government has basically said they chose not to look at tinkering and making amendments in favor of just abolishing and going with the MMPR program. And so they haven't really looked at, grow boxes that you can plug in that are very safe. They haven't looked at this formula that's in the existing regulations, which never made any sense. This didn't limit the number of plants or the size of the plants, rather. And, could lead to all kinds of problems. It's very, very differently designed to all the U.S. states where patients produce much less plants, and they don't seem to be having the same types of problems. So, I think the government made a policy decision that they wanted to stop the grows based on these anecdotal complaints, and that's really what this is all about. But we say the patients are the ones that are going to suffer. They will suffer irreparable harm if there's no injunction. It will either be irreparable harm arising out of their health situation, or because they're once again having to go through the courts in terms of the whole allegations of crime, when in fact it's trying to protect your constitutional rights.
Right. Now, John, if the case isn't successful, what's the next step for the marijuana community, the medical marijuana community, on this issue?
Well, anybody who has the police come, as I say, I think if you're a medical patient, you make sure you've got an extra copy of all your medical materials there to give to them, and you tell them who you are, who your doctor is, all the rest of them. They'll see you're a medical patient, and then they'll have to decide if they're going to arrest you or charge you. And, they may just take people's plants or something. Hopefully they don't rip down the grow equipment and stuff. People make sure that they should say, look, the court case is ongoing, it's not over, so, you maybe take the plants but not the equipment. And then they should get counsel or, be ready to say to the Crown, we're pleading not guilty, we're filing a constitutional challenge, we're being forced to choose between our liberty and our health, and we're pleading not guilty, and, take it to trial. That's what I think everybody should do.
I just wanted to ask you, if people wanted to contribute to the campaign or help out in some way, is there a way for them to do that?
They should call my office and speak with Jay, my bookkeeper. I think this is the best way. Don't just talk to reception. If whoever speaks to Jay, Jay can take the credit card and process it, or they want to send bank to draft your money order, or whatever they want to do, we can arrange it. And urge people to do it as much as possible. It's taken a huge amount of time and a big cost, and it's going to continue to do so, but we need to tell this story to Canadians so they understand what's happening here.
Absolutely. John Conroy, thank you very much for talking to me today, and best of luck with the case. We'll be watching it for sure and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Jeremiah.